Thank you, everyone. I call this meeting to order at 5:31. We'll move on to roll call, starting with Alejandro.
Here.
Eric.
Here.
Joey.
Here.
Edgar.
Here.
Monica.
Here.
Dane.
Here.
Alex.
Here.
Aubrey.
Here.
Martin's absent. Lacey.
Here.
Greg's excused also. Jess is also excused. Josh.
Here.
Cece.
Here.
And then I'm also here. Alright, we'll move on to agenda approval. Please feel free to look over the agenda for March 4th, 2020. Eric?
Make a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion on the table. Dane seconds. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? One abstention, so moved. We'll move to the approval of minutes from February 26th, 2020. Please look over it. Were there any questions or concerns? Alex?
I move to approve the agenda.
Motion, table. Is there a second?
Oh, whoops.
Eric seconds. Discussion, seeing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes? Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. We'll now move to reports. Don't necessarily have any reports right now. So,
Couple things. One for everyone, including those in the gallery. Please get food that's back there so it doesn't go to waste before the end. The other ones is I have a memo to read. I'm going to share it now because it's applicable before we get further in. But it's communication, and then I have another item after that. So there was a memo sent out today from the Office of International Student Programs that I'll share regarding international travel from Steve Cook. So the health and safety of our students, faculty, and staff are Central Washington University's highest priority. After careful consideration, CWU has decided to cancel all education abroad programs and university-related international travel until the end of spring quarter 2020 and request all students, undergraduate and graduate, faculty and staff currently studying or working abroad return to the United States. In addition, the university requests those returning from international travel self-isolation for 14 days within their homes before returning to campus. New guidelines issued on March 1st by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention encourage higher education institutions to consider these measures given the speed of spread and number of countries experiencing human-to-human transmission. We understand the inconvenience this creates and ask for your patience as we work through challenges related to this request. Any member of the CW community who chooses to disregard university recommendations for international travel must understand they will do so at their own risk and may face difficulties in return travel to the U.S. and or possible restricted access to the CWU campus. We're in the early stages of notifying students and faculty who are currently abroad or scheduled to travel abroad in the next few months, as well as our international education partners, of the international travel suspension. CWU is evaluating alternative ways for students to complete their courses and educational requirements. CWU is collaborating closely with state and local public health agencies to stay on top of best practices for limiting the spread of COVID-19. Additionally, we encourage you to bookmark the website CWU has developed to keep you informed of the latest information regarding Central at cwu.edu/respiratory-viruses. Additional reliable information about COVID-19 can also be found on the Washington State Department of Health website, which I'm not going to read that out. I'll give that for you. So, and again, that has some impact. Groups are being notified and made aware of that who are looking to travel abroad, and some of those. I mean, Lacey can touch on, we have a couple of things that we have funded. Until those are finally cleared and removed, that money doesn't necessarily roll back yet. But as soon as we have a final decision on those, you'll give the update, right?
Correct. So there is one international trip that is planning, or it had planned to travel during spring break. But one of the pieces that did come up during the question and answer, but just to kind of reiterate it, is they're in an actual contract. And so they're in the early phases of talking about what the rest of that looks like. So when they go through travel agencies like that, they sign a contract to expected travel. And right now we don't really have any updates. But as soon as we do, I will be sure to share that with the committee. This is obviously kind of just came out, so they're working on it. But hopefully we have an update by next week, I'm hoping.
The other item is just a kind of a follow-up, but an updated document that you should have grabbed over there, the S&A Supplemental Funding Request Individual Assessment Tool. And so this is a revamped tool that you all, from what you all were given back in the fall, that was on there. I have copies of the original one that we had, which was kind of the guiding document to help with tracking and consistency and reviewing requests. There's really nothing new on here other than the format. Brandon and I had some conversation regarding just formatting in a way that is clearer in terms of the process of looking through and what the priorities are based on our guidelines and Killian and what's been established previously. And so if you look at it, there's really two pieces. One just gives the recommendations, and again, this is not new, but the breakdown of the funding priorities, which are established in our policy, in terms of the base funding and what those are, whether it be something that's unforeseen impacts, increases to non-student payroll, or increases that don't add non-student payroll, and increases to non-student payroll. And then any non-base funded programs fall under the next set of priorities, with new programs or activities being top, events, and then travel within it. And so really in a guide of a potential checkbox to provide some guidance for you all as you're reviewing them a little bit further. And then the back side, we did make some changes to this based on the previous questions that were on there, which are really spots for notes if so wanted. But also looking at some of the other state agencies and their documents, I can tell you, we can go into more detail, but I have thoroughly looked at all of the other public institutions and those who have any sort of framework or guideline, and Brandon can attest to this as well, as I share with them, and most of them do not have anything of much substance on there. So this is really a revamped tool that the committee created years ago. I can share the original one again with you, even though we had it back in the fall, but this is kind of an update based on conversations and some consultation with Brandon. But questions, feedback, thoughts? Great. That's all I got.
Okay, well, my updates, I got a couple, but they kind of correlate. So the first update is to inform the committee that we have $12,201 left in our budget for this year. And obviously, I think we've talked about this enough, but I think what I'd like to discuss with the committee tonight is potentially moving forward of a decision about the pending S&A supplementals that are in my queue, so the ones that are not on this list that submitted it after the winter quarter deadline. So to really, I look at it as almost kind of two different options. So do we want to see those requests? Or do we want to, and by we I mean the committee, want to make a decision about maybe setting a spring quarter deadline, since we set a fall and winter quarter deadline for those supplementals. But all of those questions really tie into the budget. And obviously, we're getting very close to being pretty close to out of money this year. And so my advice to the committee would be to consider increasing the budget to allow to see the supplemental requests and also the ones that are pending that are not on this list. And I just think it's important for the committee to consider that, because if the committee does choose to not increase the budget, it really limits the ability for the committee to invest in our current student body programs and activities. So I know there's going to be a lot of questions around that, but we've talked about if there is available funding, and at the end of the day, there is available funding to increase the budget. So if there's any questions regarding that, I would love to have that conversation if tonight would allow it. And to really, more importantly, I really want to be able to communicate with our S&A supplemental requesters that have really just been waiting. And some of them have been waiting for about a month, and I just want to kind of give them an idea of potentially where the direction is going to go spring quarter.
One, I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think another part of this as well is you are presenting to PBAC next week with an update on where we're at as well. Is that next week?
That is next week.
Okay.
Yes, and so it would be ideal if we could give PBAC an idea of where we stand as well.
We can go into that discussion now.
Sure.
We have the motion.
We can go into it. I mean, if people have questions
Yeah.
or conversation.
Dave, you want to start it off?
Lacey, do the people in your queue that we haven't seen yet, are they asking, like, is it worth it to present? Are they asking questions like that?
Yes, they're obviously a little concerned. We've been updating them about the status of the budget, and so it's really going, well, do we even want to present? What do we do? And some of these areas don't necessarily have other options. And some of them are clubs and orgs and those types of things. And so I would say it's very, a lot of the requests are very consistent to what we've seen in the past, or roughly close.
Are they for, like, majority of them for, like, on-campus stuff? Are they for traveling, or what would you say?
I would say it's a mixed. There's definitely some events and there's definitely some travel. Mm-hmm.
Well, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, because I know they're not on here. I think the hard part is we had the deadline of January 22nd, and while some are probably new, we're coming in the last week or two, a lot of them came in necessarily back in January, so they have been waiting for about a month and a half now for an update.
Yes, that is correct. They have been waiting. These are all spring events, and some of them even trickle into, like, maybe summer too. But if we remember what PBAC really wanted me to bring back last week, for those that weren't at the meeting, was really a concern that not increasing the budget could negatively impact spring events. And so I just want to, socialize that, bring that back up, and just have the committee communicate about where they're at with those.
And so, like, how many requests do you have that's pretty much queued up for spring?
Oh gosh,
Well,
I believe
Well, I
it's
guess, like, going back to, like, earlier conversations, you said we're pretty much scheduled out.
and I think Joey can answer that.
I mean, yeah, we already have a tentative schedule that goes through all of spring quarter, which, and I will say personally, I don't necessarily want our meetings to go till 8 every week. However, our meetings right now, we have things on the agenda for every meeting except I think our very last meeting right beforehand, which includes, because we still have program reviews for our base funding groups, which will continue into May. And then the other part that's really on our agenda beyond the program reviews is going through and doing the annual report reviews, so we have time set aside to that. So there are items. I mean, I think it's going to be hard. It's going to honestly depend on how much time you all spend with each of the annual reports. We're breaking them up and blocking them. And so there are things each week, but for those who've been on the committee before, it depends on if we're going to spend a total of 15 minutes for the whole annual report one week, then they could be shorter meetings, but depends on our process. There are items on the agenda for every meeting except that last one. And so there's potential that we could have some room within there. I mean, my concern is if we open it and we get a massive influx, it could be a large one, but we also don't know. We may not get many more than what we have as well. It's hard to say.
Yeah. And so that's what I think we need to talk about too in this discussion, is not just talk about, like, obviously the budget, where we want to go with expanding or not, but we also need to consider that we are pretty much near capacity for spring quarter already with, like, the requests that we have that we may or may not listen to. So I think this decision also has to come with if we even want to do a deadline or if we close it and we can't hear any more requests, because in reality we can hear maybe a handful more even if we have a deadline.
And there's 10 currently right now that are not on this list.
Alex?
I mean, I think considering the time restraints, that obviously plays into it. But I think my just general thoughts on it, which probably won't be a huge surprise, but I think it kind of negates the purpose of setting a budget if we blow past it in a large fashion. So I would prefer to not raise it.
Other thoughts? Eric?
Well, I agree with PBAC to not increase the budget to the detriment of events in spring. I think is wrong. We're not our job here is to not sit and hold the money abreast of all of the things. It is to spend the money for the students that are here at the current time. With $3.5 million in that budget, obviously we're not going to use it all, and I'm not saying that all requests should be fully funded, but for us to not increase the budget and just sit here and say, oh well, I'm very concerned, and I share the same concerns that PBAC has given.
Alex?
And I'll just say I understand that perspective. I am just particularly skeptical of the assertion that, one, we would not fund everything at the full amount, and that we would not very quickly blow through our money. Like we mentioned last week, we've denied three requests this year. And I guess my point in saying I'm not sure what the point of setting a budget is if we're going to blow past it. Like, if we are concerned about just sitting on 3.4.5 million, why not just make that the budget and just have everyone submit a request, and then let's just review the requests and just approve or deny based on those things that they turn in? Because we talk about evaluating things critically, and of course I can't say that we 100% haven't, but I just find it very hard to believe that when we've only denied 3 requests. That doesn't seem critical to me, especially when we've had such a high budget and such a high volume of requests. I would just say I'm pretty skeptical that if we kept raising the budget, we wouldn't just spend the 150, 200 that we raised it to. And I don't think that's a good precedent to set, because at that point, why not just set the budget at 3.4 and then just keep approving things? That's not how you run a budget. Like, that's not how you manage finances. Like, that you set a budget, you stick to it. If there are expenses that you have, you factor those in. But outside of that, like, you got to stick to your budget. I guess, I don't understand the point of setting a budget if we're just gonna approve virtually everything and keep raising it.
I mean, I do want to touch on 2 things you said, Alex, because I think it's important to set the budget. I think we're in a unique situation with this for 2 reasons in terms of how we set the budget for this. And I do have a question, because I don't want to trust my memory, that I'm going to ask Lacey. I mean, the first part is really we set the budget here based on looking at the number of requests we've received in the past. And so at the beginning of fall quarter, we have no idea what we're going to see. And so it's a balance of what do we see in the past, and based on Lacey's recommendation as the fund manager, what is a reasonable amount to start at? I say that knowing that, and this is where the question comes up, in terms of precedent, it is not unusual for us to set a budget and increase it. And this is where I don't know if you know off the top of your head or look. I can tell you in the 7 years I have advised this committee, I don't recall necessarily more than 1 year where we have not increased the budget throughout the year. But do you know or have that in terms of?
I mean, I would actually agree with that. At least in my experience, it's always so hard to gauge what requests we're going to get. And so especially at the beginning of the quarter, we usually just set it on historical trends. And that 300,000 is kind of in the median of what we see. And there's been years where it's been 100,000 that we've seen, and then there's been 400,000 of requests. So it's just kind of like gauging that. And so to go back, yes, Joey, it has been increased quite a few times.
Well, and where I was going further with that is while it has, some of this is also a unique piece that, I mean, this is all a learning process, and so I may speak incorrectly to this, so I'm going to let Lacey correct me. Part of the pieces we've had, and it's less of an impact on our supplemental budget now than it was in previous years, the way it was set up, as actually Todd can go back to, as he was on the committee at the time. Our supplemental budget pieces, some of the recommendations are based on when we're looking at enrollment targets and where we're at, and not always knowing. So when we're sitting in October trying to estimate where we're going to hit for the year and then also potential for the next year, which is well in advance. We don't always know where we're at, to where traditionally, and this is not me saying one way or the other, I'm just giving you historical, we have seen increases that typically will come up in spring quarter because we have gotten to the point of exhausting, and the funds manager will come in and say, based on where we're at, no, we shouldn't increase because we don't have money. Or yes, we're looking at this, we're bringing in more money than we anticipated, or we have that, to be mindful of it so that way that money isn't spent without the recommendation of this committee, because there is the ability for that if we don't utilize that money, that it could be utilized for other purposes that are still allowable if people feel we're not adequately managing those funds. I don't know if I said that correctly.
Alex?
I guess I would just ask, is it a mistake to assume that by continuing to raise the budget, we offer more opportunity for more requests, which then will, because we set our budget based off precedent, will lead us to set higher budgets, which means we'll get more requests and then increase it more, and then set the next year's budget based off the precedent of the year before, to the point that we just keep increasing.
I mean, I would. Oh, sorry. Okay. I wouldn't say that's a mistake. But I think what's happening in our at Central is that the awareness is out there. So when some of these policies changed and the money was freed up, it was really my office, student involvement's office, really trying to push this out to students to let them know that there was an opportunity for them to request funds. So when you're talking about like the publicity around S&A dollars, it's just more vocalized to say, hey, we have freed up about $1 million here. Now is your chance. If you have these amazing opportunities, let's go. That's talking to the College of Business to make sure that those students also understand. And so it's really bringing in those deans to really make sure that if they do have those student groups that they can, notify those groups and let them know that there's an opportunity for programs and travel and whatnot. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily a mistake. I understand what you're saying, Alex, but I think in this circumstance, we're really just seeing an increased awareness of the funding.
Well, and I'd say there's other things in addition. I mean, even, and I'm going to pick on you, Edgar, like things we've done last year of having the S&A fair, and I don't know if that's what we called it, of raising awareness. So it's, some of this is the beast we created by increasing awareness and knowledge of these things and getting people out there and trying to recruit outwardly to bring you all on board who maybe didn't know about the S&A committee. But to go back to your question, I mean, while I think Lacey touched on it, I will answer another part of it is this is not a sustainable piece, which is another conversation that Lacey and I have been having and is looking at potential things we can implement or put in place because, again, over the last 7 years, if you go back historically, and we have it all, it's all on the website, the increases, I mean, the number of requests have increased, the amounts requesting have increased, the amount of time the committee spent, and this is not unusual, this has actually happened to the committee even previously, and there have had to be adjustments that the committee made, which is why we ended up creating base funding for units like the music department, for music travel, for academic senate, for club senate, for sports clubs, to alleviate some of what the committee was seeing at those times, because it did create essentially a massive amount. And so there were decisions and things that were made by the committee to help alleviate some of that, and which is we're finding ourselves in that same situation again. And so some of that is going to be conversations that are ongoing right now, but are really going to be a huge part of next year's committee to determine if there's changes to be made, whether it be to supplemental, but a huge part could be base funding as an option of that, of how we help alleviate some of what we're seeing. But again, the hard part is we don't know what will happen with that, because when we create that, again, we created some of these stopgaps to alleviate what we were seeing, and the situation has only grown anyways in other areas, and those areas have outgrown the amount of funding they've received for them as well. So within it, so I think it's a piece that we have across the campus of a resource that people are utilizing within that. But it is really going to be dependent on what we put in place moving forward within that, because it won't be sustainable of, again, like you said, if we allocate out X amount this year and then next year's based on it, and that grows, and then that grows. I mean, really what will happen is either, and probably both, this committee will not have time to review all of those, which is already a conversation discussed on potential changes of structure. But also the money in the reserve will very quickly dwindle away, which again, our purpose is not to be saving or hoarding that money, it's to spend it, but we'll go probably faster than maybe we want, which is where really the funds manager is the one saying, hey, you need to not spend this because now we're blowing through this faster than what we should. Because again, we could set a budget of $3.5 million and we could spend $3.5 million in 1 year if this committee so chose. I mean, that would be a lot of requests. I'd assume that'd be going up to Board of Trustees, because the only way I'd imagine us doing that is pretty large requests. So there is some involvement on that. But I mean, there are already changes that have to be in place, but this is not new. The committee constantly has to be adapting to the requirements, and we've seen this over the years happen multiple times. I mean, I would also say I don't know, because you can't see the future, even if we don't make any changes, I don't necessarily anticipate we're going to see less requests coming in the future. I think it'll be a different challenge for the committee to determine we'll still see that same number of requests grow and the amount grow. Because in reality, the amount we've allocated for base funding has not necessarily grown, but the amount of requests have grown. It's just how do we operate within that capacity. And each year is going to be different, and we don't have a way of knowing in advance.
Cece?
I guess the question I have would be like, hypothetically speaking, what number would y'all want to increase the budget to? That's the conversation that we're having. My opinion is that I don't think we should increase it. Again, I'm very strong with budgets, but if it's looking otherwise, how much would y'all think it's will be necessary to increase? It's a question for anyone to answer.
And I'm not giving you an answer to that question. I will say when this has come up in the past, the question has been posed to the fund, and I'm totally now putting Lacey on the spot, which is why I'm not making eye contact. It's totally then posed to the funds manager of, do you think, and if so, what? What is a reasonable amount? Which is then, I mean, kind of up to the committee. If they're like, we really can't afford to go more than this, then it's up to you all on what is feasible within it. But I think we're also in a different spot than previous committees of, this is normally in spring quarter when we've already, we know what we've received at that point, to where right now this is only as of January 22nd. And so it's kind of we don't, at least I don't. I think Lacey's the only one who knows what those other 10 requests look like that are out there. So it kind of depends on what you all are thinking within that.
Well, because I'm just thinking that if we increase this budget, spring quarter requesters are going to come. Not that it's a bad thing, but they're going to come. Then we'd have to. I literally everything that Alex just said, just like, and basically I said the same thing he did. I agree wholeheartedly. But if no one like has an idea of how much money we should increase, then we should not do it at all. Like it's either like we're going to increase it or we're not. In my mind, it's like a straightforward thing.
Even though no one's really officially asked me what that dollar figure would look like. I mean, I really do think, obviously, this is up to the committee, but, I would look at that, $50,000 to $100,000 range. And I know that seems like a dramatic jump from a budget, and I do appreciate we have some really budget-friendly people here. I do, really, it warms my heart. But in this circumstance, I think what is hitting me the most is the negative impact that the requesters would have in the spring. So as a lot of you are probably second, third year, fourth years around campus, there's a lot of spring events that are happening and that are in the queue. So I would just really consider that impact if you don't. We have the funding. We talk about having the funding. If the answer is no, that we don't want to increase the budget, then I just need to basically have that information in order to communicate it out to the requesters that are already in the queue, and then also base funded areas and our student body, campus community, so that they could be prepared.
Cece?
would $50,000 or $100,000, would that cover majority of spring quarters and the queue? Because I just think that, in my mind, again, I haven't been on the committee all year, but the being critical thinkers and critical voters, again, said, it hasn't seemed like it's been happening. What is it, like almost 60 requesters? But and there's like 3 who got denied ours, something like that. But it just seems like if the conversation is to bring it to increasing this budget, like my fear is that we're going to be out again. Like there's no way to say we're going to think critically now. Now that we have an increase in the budget, but like I don't know if it's like a loose conversation. Like, would you all want to increase the budget $50,000, like, or no? I'm not sure.
Alex?
And I don't want to take up like a whole bunch of time, but if we are looking at, I guess I'll just like offer my justification for why I would not want to, and I'm probably going to commit a huge logical fallacy in doing so, but so if we're saying that a lot of these requests we in the past have kind of seen, okay, this is a consistent request, let's add it to base funding, let's give that a dedicated amount of money, and let's say we have some things that we've seen consistently that we want to add to our base funding. So now we have more in our base funding that we are contributing to every quadrennium. And inevitably, these base funding groups are going to come and ask for increases in their budgets. And at some point down the line, that's going to lead to a fee increase. I know that when we look at the supplemental piece and the individual requests that we get on a weekly basis, they seem like very one-off. This is just one trip that this person's going on. This is just one event that this person's putting on. But if we keep seeing them as consistent things and we start adding them to base funding, they're contributing to the bloat in the fee that we have, a bloat that we are not addressing. There are things in our base funding that we probably shouldn't even be funding right now. But it's not like we're going to go back and look at that because we spend all of our time looking at supplemental funding. This is just going to be a continuing cycle. It's just going to compound on itself. And I'm not comfortable contributing to what is essentially the root of, and I know this is going to be like a vast assertion here, but essentially this is what contributes to the student loan debt crisis. Because we have 100 committees that do the same thing, where we just add more money and add more things we're funding, and it just compounds, and we don't look at it every year, and it keeps going. And then 4 years down the road, we're like, oh, why are students paying $10,000 more to go to school? Because every committee is doing this. Every council is doing this, and we don't look at it. We don't look at it critically. We don't say, hold up, should we be paying for this? Is this something that's adding value to the student body? Those are not conversations that we have because we don't have time to have those conversations because we're too busy allocating more money that we probably shouldn't be allocating. Like I said, I voted to recommend that we deny most of these requests because I don't think most of these requests add any value to the student body as a whole. And I think that's what we should be looking at. If we want to actually sit down and have that kind of broad conversation about the impact that these decisions are having on the university as a whole, then that's great. We can have that conversation. If we come to a place where a good enough argument is made that I'm like, actually, you know what? Yes, we should be funding these individual things. Then so be it. Like, I'm perfectly willing to change my mind on that. But if we are not willing to have those conversations and we are not willing to make the time to have those conversations, then I am not willing to contribute to this problem. I'm not going to do it. We can vote, but we're going to go with 0 for me. That's going to be my vote. So I guess we've had a proposal for what that dollar amount could look like, 50 or 100,000. I am going to move that we do not raise the budget and that we inform people who are looking to request for spring that will not be accepting requests for spring quarter.
There's a motion on the table. Let's get a second. CC seconds. Discussion on the motion to not adjust the budget and not accept any requests.
And I'm going to respond, and I'm going to call myself out of order before Eric does, because I'm really responding to what Alex just said, not necessarily the motion, but given that what he said could contribute to that. I do want to point out, I think I'd have to disagree with Alex because we do spend a considerable amount of time. The committee spends every 4 years, which is what the makeup was, determining the base funding, and there's not a guarantee. So next year, the committee will very thoroughly review every base funded unit to determine if we continue funding or not. And in the past, there have been groups who have been cut funding or have ceased getting funding altogether, or the decision of the committee to increase it. So I would say compared to other areas of campus, this is probably one of the most scrutinized areas because we do look at it critically and we'll make that decision. And it goes before the students as the voice of yes, we see value or not others within that. Additionally, outside of that, that's the part that we're talking about next quarter of the annual reports when we review those is fully up to you all and how in depth you want to go over in reviewing them and calling out the questions of, are they doing this? Do we want more information for this? And I will say we've had years where the committee has been pretty diligent with some groups. We've had years where the committee has looked very just generally over it and not wanted to go into detail. So, I mean, I do want to call that part out because I think there's a considerable amount of time spent on that base funding within it and some very intentional decisions that have been made by the committee every year. And the committee has made the decisions they've had to have it 4 years. So they have the ability to see, are there impacts and changes so we can review. It was previously every year that they would do that. And it was previously every 2 years. And the decision was made for every 4 years to really look critically at, does this program or activity or service have impact on what data are you bringing? And that's what happens every 4 years. And I say that knowing that no one on this committee has been there, except for me, within that. I know Todd, who's in the gallery, has been on the committee previously when we have been through base funding. And so could comment on that. I'm not going to call you out to share that. But there is a considerable amount of time spent on that, which I get the stance because being on the committee in those years in between, and especially with, I will say, last year's committee did not spend a considerable amount of time. Even though we went through multiple meetings of pulling up the annual reports, there was not much discussion beyond what the advisors already brought forward within there. So there is a lot of dependent on this committee. The challenge we have with the supplemental funding is this really is one-time funding that you all determine what the priority is. So if you all don't feel that these things meet the merit, that is a decision you all make. But we as a committee don't necessarily have control on what is brought forward as a request. And so that's where, to give the feedback, because we as the advisors have to answer to, that's fine if we deny all these, what are you spending this money on? And I haven't heard a good answer necessarily in all our discussions on this, because again, we're not the ones controlling what comes forward within that. So I do want to just push back a little bit on that comment about the critically looking at these and reviewing them, because I cannot think of another area on campus that has every 4 years come up, you may not be funded. And I can tell you every base funded unit gets very nervous going into the base funding years because they know that it's a possibility they may not continue to get funded within that. Put a lot of time and effort into those reviews.
Is this about the motion?
I guess it was a response to that, but I don't know if that's germane anymore.
Yeah.
Probably too. All right, so discussion on the motion. Eric?
I think not funding, or I think not increasing the funding is really like hurting our foot and cutting it off to heal it. I believe we are shooting ourselves. We are telling our fellow students, sorry, we've hit our budget. We know there's monies left, but we just don't find value in what you're requesting, so we're not going to increase the budget. And that's unfortunate. I will be voting against this motion because it's wrong.
Yeah, wait. CC, you're first.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I feel uncomfortable too. I feeling comfortable with the fact that we have $3.5 million, and we're basically penny pinching, if you will, over the last quarter here. And I just like to address, critically doesn't mean denial. We don't have to deny, we don't have to be critical and deny things. We have been critical through evaluating each one of these, and it doesn't mean we have to deny each one. We speak about revising a way to be critical. Well, haven't we already made strides to do that through the subcommittee? I think the subcommittees, that's their job that they're working on. To change mid-year, change our policy to evaluate mid-year, I think that should also be brought into mind. But that is not, I think that's weird. I don't think that that's fair to the people that came before. I don't think that's fair to people that come afterwards. But yeah, the subcommittee's working on new ways to evaluate base funding, supplementary, whatever, which I think is great. But like Eric said, I think that not increasing the budget with the 3.5 million we have is kind of not the best option we have. I think that since we're here to support our students right now, I think the best option would be to increase the budget and not approve everything necessarily fully, but to keep continuing our critical analysis of each one, have that as the way we go forward.
Cece?
So I guess if, commenting on Dan, if we don't approve all of them fully, who's to say that one request isn't as good to be fully funded as the other one? I just think that critically thinking, I don't think everyone should get denied. I don't know if that's taken out of context, but I do think that again, the biggest thing for S&A is student. How does it affect Central and the students on campus? And I do not think that everything that we've approved so far that I've been on this committee has done that. Has followed our purpose statement and that's the problem, is that unless somehow everyone wakes up tomorrow or next week and realizes like, okay, I want to move with the motion statement and not off of how they might think. Oh, I just don't know what the confusion of it. But I do think that if there's a way for us to think critically, as in thinking critically on our mission statement, then if that so were to happen, then yeah, maybe we can increase the budget. But it isn't, in my personal opinion, it isn't that that's going to happen. So it's like, why increase the budget just to approve everything without thinking about how it's going to affect Central? That's my number. That's what bothers me, is that it doesn't reflect on Central anyway. If anyone goes to Olympia, if anyone goes to California, it doesn't, for, I don't know.
Dave?
Yeah, no, I think you bring up great points. I think that's the hardest thing we have to do, is to make those judgment calls, because how is the lacrosse team going to the tournament, the same as some group going to South Africa? How are those related, right? Yeah, that's a big question, no, for sure. But what you said, the first thing you said, I think I didn't clarify my original statement as well as I should have. I don't mean that we're going to automatically, if we increase the budget hypothetically, I didn't mean that we would cut people's funding automatically. I didn't mean that. I meant we obviously look at them, and if they are deemed beneficial to the campus students, then we would fund them fully, or we would, like we have done. I didn't mean that we would just automatically say 50%. I didn't mean that. But yeah, no, you bring up really good points about how we do analyze each one differently. Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing to do, but I think that's what we're working on. I think we're trying to figure that out, and until we do that, we can't just go off a mindset of each one of us having our own interpretation of that. We need to come together and figure that out, what we're doing, what we're working on, like in the subgroup, they are, and that's what we're working towards, but we don't have that right now. And if we keep going on off that idea that we do have that, but not everybody's on board with that, that's detrimental to our requesters. having said that, personal interpretation is also one of the best things we have on this committee because we all are diverse in our own way. And that's what is also good to have in the committee. Not all agreeing on the same thing. I mean, that's well seen through here. That's what I'll say.
Cece?
I think the biggest thing is that from what I'm hearing is that because this is happening mid-year, and a policy change, well not a policy change, but a change in how we are going to move forward. But I think that maybe or it'd be nice the subcommittee, I don't know if they're doing that already, could make an outline for the next year. Because again, we're halfway in the year. There was a whole quarter, raining winter quarter, but some spring quarter that I guess it was the fault of the previous committee. I don't know that now we're drawing the policy, these outlines, this structure that we didn't have, that I'm assuming we didn't have. So that's nice. But then for the following year, they'll have that. For this year, for this year we have a budget and that's just what it is. But then when it was proposed, what would we increase the budget to? If it's not fair that we don't increase the budget, and when it's asked what will we increase it to, and no one says anything, it seems like there's nothing to say about it. So nothing to say about it, then this is not increase it. And if no one knows what to increase it to, then it must not be something that is worth increasing. But I feel like when do we vote on it after everyone discusses?
You just called it.
Called previous question.
So now we are voting on it. So we're going to vote on the motion to not adjust the budget and not accept any requests for the spring quarter. All those in favor? 3. Opposed? Abstentions? Alright, so the motion's denied. We'll go back to just a normal discussion. Eric?
I'd like to make a motion to approve a $100,000 increase in the budget.
Edgar seconds. Discussion on the motion to increase the budget, 100,000. Alex?
So we can do this. We can approve the $100,000 increase. I would agree with Cece that I do not know how all of a sudden we're going to go from a $300,000 budget with 3 denials to a $100,000 budget with how many requests do we have? Do we even have, does that even get us through that 10? How many after that?
Lacey?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer because you guys don't actually fund 100% your accuracy. So to give, I can't answer that question, Alex, but what I would say is when you were talking about a dollar figure to increase, it's to allow the opportunity to see what you could invest in. That's not necessarily saying you should go ahead and allocate the $100,000 out to whoever, but it allows the ability to say yes and no. But if we automatically say no, then there's going to be a lot of things in that queue that you guys don't get to see.
And so the amount that we have left of requests currently, what is that?
The 92.
92? Okay. So, yes, there's the possibility that we don't fund all of that. Personally, I think everyone knows I'm skeptical that we won't do that. But, so that leaves us in spring quarter with theoretically $8,000. I guess I'm just saying I don't understand the point of doing this. I get that it gives us more opportunity to look at more requests, probably a good amount of them for travel for a small number of people who will come back and theoretically give a presentation to their club or something. I'm confused as to what that adds to the student experience at Central. I'm confused as to how the allocation of those funds is beneficial to students at Central. I have had many conversations with people who have asked why requests like this get funded and asked why their funds are being used for people's trips. And it's hard for me to answer those questions when it does seem like there is a pretty large gap between, and yes, I agree, being critical doesn't just mean denying everything. but I'm very hard pressed to believe that being critical means approving all but 3. That is a pretty big gap. And I don't know how we begin to close that gap without starting to have a conversation about closing that gap. Really much my time.
Cece.
So I don't know. I'm gonna ask if I'm understanding this correctly. So if we hypothetically increase this budget to $100,000 to see the other requesters, does that just mean that that the next step would be for everyone else to just increase it more now that they see the other requesters? Because we have this budget that we can increase whenever we want, the 3.4. So let's say we increase it $100,000, and then they're like, oh, spring quarter, you have $8,000 left. Oh, but there's this event going on, and these people want to go there. Let's increase another $100,000 to make sure that they can get paid for. They're just like, at that point, there's no structure. There's no structure. That's just how I feel about it. And increasing it to that extent now, well, clearly any less than that, half the list won't be able to get approved. But anything more would just make us, I'm not going to do it, but make everyone else increase it more as they go on. Because we're like, there's more money to spend. What if we touch a budget of 3.4, why can't we keep touching it, touch it more? And I know Lacey's here to balance out like us not drawing it out, but I'm just not seeing any structure here, and that's my fear, is that once this and I know what happened in previous years and everything, and that's cool and fine and dandy, but like I wouldn't want to be on I wouldn't want to be in a space that made moves for students with no structure. It's a dangerous game to play.
I mean, the only thing I'll say is just as a reminder, this motion is not, based on the wording that I heard Eric say, is not discussing at all whether we will receive requests for spring quarter. That is a separate piece which could be moved in later on, and I would encourage, given what's on here, that be a conversation for next week, since it's not part of this motion necessarily. But that is not necessarily increasing this means we're hearing requests for spring quarter. Motion was only to increase the supplemental request by 100,000.
Eric.
As you had said, you have heard anecdotal pieces from people saying they're questioning things, as I have heard anecdotal pieces from people being happy that we are funding requests to help the students' experience here on campus. My fear is if we continue, well, I'm going to say we because we are a committee, and to hold on to these funds, what is to prevent the administration from saying the students aren't spending that money, and I understand it's the students' money, but to say, well, there's this thing that we need to do for the students, and we need to spend that money for that because it's not being spent. And I would much rather, and I'm not saying this $100,000 that I've made a motion for should just willy-nilly support all these things. I think students on this committee and faculty are being critical thinkers. I take offense for someone saying that we're not being critical. I think that goes against how we are as humans. We are all being critical. And whether we approve something or not is not about whether I'm just like, I have no standards and I don't care. That's not how I look at things. I am looking to do my job as representing my fellow students on this campus to spend the money that we pay. I do not think that my fees that I pay are bloating a bureaucracy on this campus. There are questions about how tuition is funding things. There are questions about other fees. And we need to be cognizant in our space and what we have control over. And we have control over this dollar amount. And the greater questions need to be answered, but that's not something that we are able to do at this moment because that is not in our purview. But these are questions for PBAC. These are questions for the Board of Trustees. These are questions for the legislature in how they fund college campuses across the state of Washington and why they continue to reduce funding. I'll end right there.
Josh, do you still?
I'm gonna go to Alex.
Alex.
I feel like, did Alejandro know? You did it earlier. Okay.
Sorry.
Just want to jump in front of everyone. Yes, like I said, when we look at this in isolation, this is one pot of money for a very specific niche. Well, I guess that's not really true. We have a very specific mandate and very specific guidelines for the Killian. But those things are part of the whole, I would say. And I would say from the conversations that I have heard and been a part of with administrators and with the trustees and with legislators, they are looking for us to make those decisions. The legislature is not making decisions about that's why they delegate this responsibility, because they're not going to sit around deciding where $500,000 or $300,000 goes for student services. That is a responsibility that the state of Washington delegates to us and asks us to be good stewards of.
I know that.
And so when those conversations happen, the question is, hey, how are you spending this? Not how should we view it, not how should them as legislators, how should we evaluate it, how are you spending it? And so I think that responsibility does fall on us to view ourselves as a part of a whole, and to take into account context and to take into account, yes, impacts. We're talking about very short-sighted impacts. I'm talking about more long-term impacts. We talk about this compounding. We talk about adding these things to base funding. I get it. It is a very hard decision to look at people in the face and say, hey, I know you're excited about this thing, but we can't fund it right now. I get that that's difficult. I understand. But our job as a committee is to make hard decisions and to make hard choices and to not be beholden to some sort of sense of, oh, well, we have to please everyone. That's not why we're on a governing body. If you want to be on a governing body, don't be on a governing body. Our job is to make hard decisions and to look at things and say, hey, listen, this is not in the best interest of the whole, not the individual. If we want to take things individually, then we're going to blow through this. It's not, we're not going to stop at 100,000. We're going to keep going. We're at, if we do 100,000, we're at 400,000. What's to stop us from going to 500,000, then 1 million? And I get that I'm doing the whole slippery slope thing and that that's not the best way to, but I think we need to look at ourselves in the context of the whole and say what is best for the university as a whole, and be courageous and be brave and say, hey, listen, I get it. These are hard decisions and I get not wanting to answer for those things, but when you sit on a governing body, you do have to answer for those things. That is just the thing that you take on when you decide to make these decisions for people as a whole. You have to answer for those, and I'm very willing to answer for those. I don't want to speak for anyone else in the committee, but I'm sure other people on the committee are willing to answer for those decisions.
You gonna call the question?
I'd like to call the previous question.
Perfect. All right, we'll move to voting on the motion to adjust the budget $100,000. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions?
He has it's a tie vote, which
Oh,
means the chair
gotcha.
votes.
Sorry.
I'm going to vote to deny it, mainly because I want to know if we're going to accept requests or not. So then we'll go back to discussion. Joe?
Well, and since we're really under the report part, I would recommend that we move forward at this point. We can revisit this because I do know we have 2 specific new requests who have a concert tonight who need to leave at a time frame. And they're the first request up after we finish our deliberation of voting. So if you all would like to continue this discussion, I say we can continue that later on or move at a different point. But I think we need to move forward at least to allow those presenting so they can leave on time.
I'd like to table this discussion until after we have presentations tonight.
And would it be better to amend the agenda to make sure people get through things earlier? Or?
We can, if the committee would like to move presentations to it before.
I mean, we don't have to.
Cece?
My second is first and
But. Oh, yes,
Yes.
sorry.
Oh, was that that was a motion?
I want to amend my motion.
Oh.
I want to table this discussion and move presentations before we go to old business.
Are you fine with that? We're gonna do an altered Harley Pro tonight. Great, that's the new motion.
Alright, so that's the motion. Table this discussion and then adjust to move the presentations up. Is there a second? Alex seconds.
CC seconded it already.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
right,
see.
yeah.
Oh, I see.
Any discussion? Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Alright, so then all those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Alright, so moved. We will table this discussion and then move up our what was that, first two?
Well, I think we'll just move presentations. in
Move
general.
presentations
We'll still
up.
do public comment and then presentation.
Alright, so we will move to the next part. Alright, move to the next part of the agenda, which is public comment. First call. Is there any public comment at this time? Alright, seeing none, we'll move to the next part of the agenda, which is amended to new business, subsection A, which is supplemental funding request presentations. Request 2053, which is performance uniforms for Mariachi Club.
Could we do the trip first and then the uniforms? It just makes logically sense. To
You
why-
can do them kind of both at the same time if you
Yeah.
want, yes. I know you all have to go as well, so, same group. But
I thought I was doing that. I was like,
yeah.
So, my name is Daniel Cedeno. I am the president of the club.
My name is Yahaira Ramirez. I am the treasurer. I'm Karen Olivares. I'm the senator.
I'm Andrea Hernandez, and I'm a first year member.
We are Mariachi del Centro, a club on campus. We perform on campus, perform in the community. We share our culture through our music, and that's to make sure that that the institution and the community is more diverse. When we're performing, we like to make sure that everyone understands what we're trying to portray. Well, why we do this is because we want to make sure that students have a way of connecting to our culture, especially that the next students are growing numbers every year. Every year we see more students coming in, and we want to make sure that they're welcome on campus, that they see the culture. When we do see students, we always welcome them to see us perform, even if they don't know how to play an instrument. A lot of the times when we're performing, we try to make the community see what our culture is. We're not trying to forget our culture. Our culture is something that, as time passes by, we're starting to forget, like, oh, well, what did our parents listen to? So Mariachi culture is Mexican culture. So when we're performing, we also make sure that we implement all of that. Andrea will talk to you about the festival.
Okay, so the festival that we hope to go to in the summer is in Guadalajara, Mexico. It is one of the most, I guess, famous and well-known mariachi festivals in the world. Mariachi Barrios, which is one of the most well-known mariachis out there, performs here so that we can all see them and see what a professional mariachi really looks like and what we strive to be every day, every performance, every practice. We're taking 12 students total for this trip to represent CWU. And for this trip, we're not just watching performances, we're performing as well. We're performing at the festival, at universities and workshops around Guadalajara.
So as you can see, this festival is a festival of culture. There is traditional folklorico dancing. They have jaripeo, they have charreria, which is Mexico's national sport. It's not football. And then mariachis, they have a national parade, and followed by Mariachi Huarca, which is the best mariachi in the world. So why are we going? So CWU Mariachi Club is a relatively new club on campus. Although Central has provided a class on campus, we can only learn so much from our professors that haven't played mariachi. So with us going to this trip, we're going to be learning from professional mariachis that have generations of experience. And we're going to be going to a place where mariachi was birthed, literally. So we're going to have a deeper understanding of why mariachi was formed and why is it so celebrated within the Mexican culture. Our plan and our hope is for students to come back and bring this to campus and start new events and start new programs, and hopefully someday go back to their hometowns and start a mariachi and be able to connect this trip with Central Washington University, allowing us to call this home. And these are pictures of our past performances. This was for Cinco de Mayo here at Yakima. Like I said, we don't only perform in Central Washington University, we perform all over the state. So these are just pictures of things that we've done throughout the year.
So we are requesting $5,818. Majority of this money is going to go for airfare and for housing for the 12 students that will be coming with us on this trip. We are also fundraising with that money. It's going to go towards meals for the 12 students.
So as you can see, our total expense is $13,000 from the sources that we're asking from international office. We already have 1,200 committed from an international office. We have 1,200 committed from the Diversity and Equity Center. From Club Senate and SAS, we are in their agenda, so we still haven't heard back towards when we're going to present, but that's still on, we still got to hear back from them. But in regards to that, what we're expected to have at the end is $11,718, and with our efforts with fundraising, we're gonna fundraise the rest of $3,600, which is just the meals. As you can see, we're just fundraising for the meals since we know that that's not something that S&A can cover for. Any questions?
Open up the floor. Questions? Alright, so I'm a little confused. Are you performing at this, or are you
Yeah.
starting
We're performing.
We're performing, and not only we're performing, we're also participating in the workshops. So that goes to like why we're asking for money for suits, which we'll go into it right now. But
Yeah, so we are performing.
yes, we are.
Eric?
How did you determine the 12 that are going to be going on this trip?
So we do have like a skill level that we are asking the students to have prior to going to this performance. We are representing not only Central Washington University, but our state, our nation. Not many people from the United States go to Guadalajara for this conference. So it's really important to us that we have a standard that everyone can at least meet. And I know it's maybe a little bit excluding people, but we're just trying to represent Central as best as we can, and hopefully try to bring maybe in the future more students who don't have that skill and maybe can bring that in the future. But for right now, we're just trying to have a better representation for us and trying to have us sound the best.
Okay.
How many students are in your club?
We have 15 students in our club.
See questions, we move on to the next presentation.
So, as you can see, this is our last quarter's recital. You can notice that as we're growing, we're running out of suits to give out. Like, we're trying to make sure that we're all matching. In mariachi culture, it's a must. It's like a requirement that we all match. As you can see, everyone's on point. Everyone has there's a standard for the culture. Like, it would be disrespectful for us to go and perform with us not even matching, because in the culture there's standards that they have to follow in performing. If we were to show up like how we performed last recital, they would just tell us to sit down and watch, and they wouldn't let us perform, because it was also not only that we're required, but it's a sign of disrespect in the culture.
So these uniforms, they won't just be used for this trip. They'll be used for all the future performances that this mariachi has, not just this year, but years to come. And we hope to have these in time for the trip as well in August. And like Daniel was saying, a huge purpose for that is that this festival requires us to have the matching uniforms. Like even just to sign up and all that stuff, like we have to have matching uniforms no matter what, or we can't participate in like performing.
And for the future, we do plan on asking for a quadrennial budget that will help maintain these suits. And we have also gotten the theater department to do tailoring for our suits, and also have somewhere to store them so that they don't get damaged, so that we do have them for a long time.
So in regards to the budget, we're at the suit itself, for 12 students is $450, as you can see. With the suit comes the sombrero, the botines or the shoes, the suit itself, which is the jacket, the vest, the falda, and the belt. And so we are asking for the suit, for the sombrero, for the belt, and for the moño, which is the neck bow, and for the girls' hair bows. But out of pocket, the girls are going to be paying the earrings, because that's sanitation. We wouldn't want to share that. And the shoes, because we think that everyone should own their own shoes and not share. I don't want to get foot fungus from anyone. But yeah, so we're asking the $10,900 from S&A, and then the other expenses are coming out of pocket. So our total expenses is $12,320, and we're just asking $10,980 from S&A.
Okay.
So, a couple questions maybe. You have existing uniforms, and where did you guys get those? Did you guys fundraise for those or something like that?
Yeah, so in the previous years, President Gatino had fund us for the suits, but the thing is that our suits are currently commercialized, like to say like they're very not traditional. So in the pictures, as you can see, it's traditional for mariachis to wear greca, botonadura, which is they're like buttons. They're but what we have right now is like in embroidery, but it's very simple, and our suits are wearing and tearing to the point where we can't fix them anymore. And they also have like the bat logo, the central in the back, which is not traditional. So we do want to maybe make the logo more minimal, to the point where maybe it could be on the sleeve or something on the bow, but not so outspoken, very very commercialized. Yeah. So we just want to go for something more traditional and our plan is to use these suits for our elite group. So in the future, we do understand that the group is going to be growing, and we will have like a beginner, intermediate, and an advanced group. So we do plan for the suits to go to the advanced students, where they will be not only advanced in their suit, but also in the music and their knowledge. Yes.
Dane, first.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up. Was your statement accurate, or was it exaggerated when you said that this trip you're going on would be like you won't be able to perform if you use your existing uniforms?
Yeah, we would like.
That would be like
Yeah, we would.
big thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's in the rules.
All right.
Yeah, we have to have. It's because in the rules to be able to go to this festival, they're asking for the sombrero, the belt, the shoes, that everyone needs to be matching. And we currently don't have that with our existing uniforms, so that's why we're asking for new uniforms with existing materials that do match.
Yeah, and the suits we have now, they're kind of like, they're mixed match, like different parts of different suits, so that, but they're all dark colors, but they're not exactly all the same, and then some of them, like, they're too tight because.
And they're different materials. To get the material from 4 years ago to get that now, it's not, it's not possible.
And just a hypothetical, if this was not, the second one was not to be funded by the committee, is there like, I mean, I obviously don't know, is there like a rental company you can get, like mariachi uniforms or something like that? Is that a thing?
No, not at all. No, I mean, I think I know that there is like a rental company, but it's like nothing compared to what we're getting for them. The amount of money that we're going to be spending on a rental company is the amount of money that we're going to be spending for a suit, to buy the suit itself. So we might as well use some money to buy a good suit and look professional in them versus having something that's very cheaply made and that's going to break easily and we're not even going to own it.
Definitely.
Fair.
Do the band members contribute a fee or dues to the committee, or to your club?
They do not. We try to make this as free as possible to the students. Although to be able to apply for this trip, we do have to go through the international office because it is international travel. So then the students do have to pay $70, $75 insurance just in case something happens to them. Yes, allocation. But other than that, we are trying to fundraise that money for students to not have to pay anything, which you're encouraged to go every Wednesday to our fundraiser at the musical. We're selling quesadillas as an effort to fundraise for this trip.
Yeah, and whenever we perform, when the money that we charge goes back to the group, so that's how we try to maintain it free, so that anything that, like for instruments like picks, valve oil, rosin, anything that the students need, we cover it through our performance fees.
Any other questions? Alejandro?
What's like the life expectancy for like students? Like how often do you have to get new ones?
So a good suit, like a well-made suit, will last you 10 years minimum. I've had a skirt that my professor gave to me when he had firstly arrived to Wenatchee, and that suit's 16 years now, and it's beautiful in great condition. So the suits that we have now are like that quality, and so we want to be able to invest into something that we know will last us hopefully a lifetime.
Yeah, they just need to be. If you can take care of the suits, well, like make sure that they get a good storage space.
Which the theater department has already agreed to help us with that. So in regards to, we can probably have that until, I don't know.
Yeah, and usually every year when we get new students, as students are graduating, we like see what fits best to the students that are coming in. Like, hey, does this fit you?
And tailor that to the
And then
student.
if it needs to
Best
be
possible.
fixed up, but we have someone that can, a seamstress that can like modify it for that student. And not only that, we can also have them dry cleaned every year, every month, or depending on the condition of the suit. But if well taken care of, they can last decades.
Final question, Cece.
I just want to say, I went to when I was a grad last year, and you guys performed, we all performed, and I loved it. They looked very professional, and it was an amazing experience for me. So
Thank
Thank you.
you. Appreciate it. We also want to take this last moment to invite you all to our recital tonight. It's at 8 p.m. in the recital hall. We have been working on these pieces that we've been performing for this past year. We're going to be performing for Guadalajara. We're going to be choosing our best pieces. So we encourage you all to look into what your money is going to be going into. Put your hearts in the right place and come take a look at us, and we won't let you guys down.
Thank you.
Thank you,
guys.
Thank you for adjusting the.
One last thing for our last proposal, we do understand that international travel for spring quarter has been canceled, but we do want to know if we can request $360 more, which is $30 per ticket as an insurance, just in case if travel does get denied, that the money that has been spent for flights doesn't get lost. So we're asking $360 for $30 for each ticket for that money as an insurance policy for the flight tickets. Yes. Thank you.
Alright, we'll move to next up on request, 2047, which is the NCTM annual meeting.
Can you pull up the west side?
Brittany, are you still there? You hanging with us? Hello. Well, we're pulling up the thing so you can share your screen in just a second. Okay. We are on here now. Alright, you are good to go.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Brittany Bean. I'm the president of the STEM Teach Club at CWU Westside. And we are requesting funding to go to the NCTM conference. What is the NCTM? NCTM is the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. In 2020, they will be celebrating their 100th anniversary at their annual meeting, where they have thousands of math education professionals to join networking opportunities, value content, and compelling sessions. So the fact that it's the 100th year is, the annual meeting is a great place to go, but it's going to be extra special this year. Who is requesting funding? So we are actually the very first cohort of the STEM program in Westside, and we're a cohort of 7 students. So 4 of us are able to go. So who is requesting the funding? It's Brittany, Hideko, Espy, and Jasmine. We are proud members of the first cohort of the STEM Teach program at Westside. The trip is not only to benefit us learning what's important for mathematics, but also lets us pass the knowledge and information to the next cohort and share our experiences with more people. And then I went ahead and asked everybody why we personally want to go. So I went to the National Science Teachers Association conference in Seattle last December, and it was pretty life-changing. It not only was it, amazingly fun and a great experience, but it changed my views in teaching science. And I actually even fell even more in love with science and the thought of teaching it. I hope I'll be able to attend the NCTM conference for so many reasons, but mainly because I can't wait to see math education in a new light. This is Espy. So she actually had a family emergency yesterday and will not be able to attend with us. And I do have a revised budget at the end of the slide because our number will be cut by about a 4th. She wanted to go because it would be an amazing opportunity to be with like-minded individuals that are passionate about math and teaching. This is Hideko. She decided to join the Math and Science STEM program after raising her children. She thinks that she will probably be the oldest student who will ever take part in the program. She wants to take every opportunity she can during the next 1.5 years so she can prepare herself to better educate her students. We're a very tight group in the program since the cohort is small, and she is sure that the small group will be able to make the trip for a valuable experience, not only for us, but also for future members in the program. This is Jasmine. She says that as an individual with a busy schedule, it's rare that she can come across an opportunity such as the NCTM conference. She's dreamed of conferences like this, going with her peers and being able to observe the speakers and experience the sensation of being around hundreds of individuals like herself. Knowing this is the 100th anniversary, she's more excited to learn all that she can, especially since it may be the only conference her work schedule will allow her to attend. And she thanks her group members for the work that we put in to make this happen, and she wants to thank you guys. Chris Black is our professor of mathematics. She is the one that brought the conference to our attention. She said she thinks that it's important for us to go to expose ourselves to a wide variety of teaching methods and ideas to construct our own identity as a teacher. Attending will allow us to get multiple perspectives on teaching from experienced teachers
Additionally, we'll come away from the conference with a notebook full of ideas that you can implement in our own future classroom. She said it's the largest gathering of math teachers in the country, and this year will be extra special because it's the 100th anniversary of NCTM. Some of the just general benefits of the NCTM conference, it's a huge conference, as it said earlier. There's going to be about 1,000 people. The best of the best in the industry is going to be there. So being inspired by keynote speakers and other leaders in mathematics education will help stimulate passion for teaching. They will teach us about all of the newest resources, introducing things that are coming up and coming to help us kind of not only know about these new technologies and resources, but also to be able to take that into our teaching in our classroom. To stay on top of current and future trends, gain research-based insight for successful implementation of standards in our classroom. So we are currently learning about our Common Core standards and being able to see that, again, from a professional's perspective, and seeing these new insights that they have would be a really good professional development chance for us. We would also get to network not only locally, because it's such a big conference that a lot of local people are going to be going as well, but also on the national level. We obviously will gain a lot of knowledge and skills with high quality professional development, gaining new views and insights from like-minded educators and leaders of the industry. And not only that, but we'll be able to come home with curriculum, activities, and other resources to enhance our teaching. So thank you for your consideration, and if you want, I can go ahead and move on to the slide with our revised budget, or I can just send that in a separate email, or whatever you would like.
If you can move on to the slide, I think that'd be helpful, Brittany.
I don't know if you guys can see this little box I see, so I'm just going to move it out the way. Okay, so airfare, originally when we requested funding, it was back, I believe, like January 20-something. So airfare and conference tickets were a little bit lower, but I did send a revision 128, and again, here's our new revision. So we would only need, and I was just updating this as you guys were speaking, so I apparently did not do it very well. So our airfare would only be needed for 3 students instead of the 4. Our hotel would not change in price because it would be the same amount of rooms. The conference tickets, going back to the lodging, we, to try to be as frugal as possible, we are deciding to do like an Airbnb, so rent out like a small house or a section of a house, that way we're not renting individual hotel rooms, which ends up being a little bit cheaper, especially since everywhere near that conference is already booked out or is charging outrageous prices. Conference tickets, again, have been lowered to only 3 students. Transportation to and from the airport and the conference would be the same, bringing our total to $31.59.
Awesome. All right, we'll open up the floor to questions. Thank you, Brittany.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Any questions? Okay.
Brittany, how does this conference add to your knowledge and also the knowledge of other students in the teaching program?
For us, I mean, it's going to be, as we said, there's going to be workshops, speakers, there's going to be lessons and hands-on activities. That's just us gaining knowledge. And as advocates for the STEM Teach program, I mean, as of right now, we're doing tabling for the program and trying to recruit new people. And as we get that new cohort next year, we're going to be kind of, we're going to be hand-holding with them. We'll be able to kind of share what we've learned, share the resources that we have gained from the conference with the new cohort coming in.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none. All right, thanks, Brittany. We'll out next week.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. log off now, or?
I mean, you're welcome to continue listening in and enjoying the meeting if you would like, but you don't have to. You can also log off.
Okay, all right. Thank you guys so much for letting me be here.
Yeah, thank you.
Alright, that will move to the next request, which is 2051 National Conference for Undergraduate Research. It's $527.
Hi everybody, I'm Casey Schubrin, and I am pitching my case as to why I should go to the EDICAR conference. Did I use Schubrin?
Nope.
No.
I don't know.
I don't like.
Oh,
There we go.
I don't know what
It was just testing us.
So for the NCUR conference, NCUR stands for the National Conference for Undergraduate Research. It is in fact a national conference. It'll be my first national conference actually, and my first interdisciplinary conference, so I'm very excited. The paper that I am presenting is on, it's called Seeing Patriotism. It's an analysis of American Revolutionary era patriotic songs from 1777 to 1778. And so it's both a mix of, it's a musicology paper, but it's also a history paper. I'm writing it for my senior thesis for the honors college. I'm just going by myself. It is in the thriving metropolis of Bozeman, Montana, hosted by Montana State University this year from March 25th, or the conference itself is March 25th, 26th through the 28th, but because it's so far away and I'm driving, I'm gonna leave on the 25th. So I'm paying for this both from asking you for money as well as the OU. I got $750 from more, which also means I'm presenting here at source. I really want to go to this conference because, like I said, it's both a national conference, so I get to share my original research, my year and a half of research and writing and editing on a national stage, and it's not a history-specific conference. The only other conferences I've been to are only for history majors, and they're really great, but this time I'll get to kind of share with other people and get a whole bunch of interdisciplinary feedback. I'm very excited about. So here's my budget. Because I'm going by myself, I had to piece around the budget, but I'm asking for you for $527.76, which is my total budget minus the.
It'll come back. It's not.
Cool. So it's the total budget minus the $750 I got from OUR. Does anybody have any questions?
You traveled by yourself.
Just me. I was gonna go with my advisor and for the faculty, and then all canceled on me. I'm really excited about it.
Okay.
Are you gonna present at source this spring?
Yes, I will
Like,
present
so-
first, and I'm presenting the same paper at faculty,
Okay.
which is the history conference.
Alondra?
Does this impact other students in any way?
Because it's an interdisciplinary paper, it's both my senior thesis for the honors college, so we'll be able to come back and share what I've learned with all of my honors college friends and all of the history department. I'm the president of the history club, and so I'll be able to tell the history club very directly what I've learned, and it's a musicology paper, and so it'll be an example for future musicology classes.
So, moving on to Alright, with that, we'll move to the next request, which is 2052, the Western Psychological Association Conference for $9,000.
and we are from Dr. Buchanan's Directed Research Group.
So first of all, who are we? We are a diverse group of students who were chosen for this group because we demonstrated competence and interest in research in the psychological field. Our group has a 100% retention rate, so people who are involved in our research group do continue on to graduate from CWU. Being a part of this group shows a meaningful involvement here in the college. Our group is doing a wide variety of research, and things that have been ongoing to things that are new this quarter. So what exactly is WPA? It is the Western Psychological Association from April 30th to May 3rd at the Hyatt Regency in San Francisco, California. This is a conference where students, faculty, and professionals in the field of psychology will be attending from all over the west side of the country. So these professionals that we'll be seeing are people who we have been learning from throughout our entire time in the psych major, and we will be seeing various kinds of research in different formats. So the benefits to students for attending WPA is that every single one of the 5 of us who are going will be presenting research. So that will give us an opportunity to gain experience in presenting research, as well as get feedback to help our professional development from other faculty and professionals. It will also give us a very important networking opportunity for graduate schools and internships. Conferences like this are very important for resumes and CVs. It's definitely something they look for, that you have presented at conferences such as this one. So it is an important chance to gain knowledge from professionals within various branches of psychology. And then the benefits to CWU itself is that the research that is presented at WPA will be brought to source. This is also a great opportunity for CWU to show other colleges and the professionals in the field what we're working on. It's also a great experience for students, many of which are hoping to apply to CWU for grad school. And in addition to that, the studies that we will be seeing will help give us ideas for future research, as well as people will be able to give us feedback on our research to help inform future directions for our research.
So this is just a breakdown for our costs. And I would like to point out the total room that you see here on the screen is lower than our initial budget plan that we sent in, and that is because as we've grown closer to the conference date, we have been able to find ways to help reduce any unnecessary costs just to lower that total cost a little bit. So one of the things is conference registration is $90, and there's going to be 5 of us who are going to be attending this conference in San Francisco. Flights, we're doing basic round trip flights and stuff for ground transportation from the airport to the hotel we're staying at, which is actually the same hotel where the conference is being stayed at, and then lodging as well. And so these were some areas where we were able to help get that original cost that we sent in lower to the previous cost you just saw. One of them is the registration for the conference. We are doing early bird registration rather than same day registration, which helps save over $50 per student. Since there's only 5 of us going, we are going to be doing carry-on luggage only. That reduces the cost need for extra baggage claims and stuff. Personal funds for food are going to be done by students as well, so that we're not expecting food and stuff to be covered. Also, because we are such a smaller group, we're not planning on using any either on-site or off-site airport parking. That we're going to be dropped off by other family members. I know other people are going to be taking advantage of the new light rail in Seattle that takes you directly to the airport, which is very convenient. We're also booking rooms without any extra sort of amenities or anything. And then we're also, since there's pilots, only rooming together, and so we're only asking for 2 hotel rooms rather than everyone having their own individual hotel room. And thank you very much for your time, and if there are any questions, I can answer for you.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, with that, we'll move to the final supplemental funding request presentation, which is request 2054, National Conference for Undergraduate Research, Students with a Purpose.
I have it open in the Internet Explorer down at the bottom too.
Oh, you. She's like, I know it was somewhere.
Yeah.
Where's the PDF? Okay. We're cool. The panic is I think so. I think we've tried this before.
Yeah. I checked it.
Okay,
You did it.
then it does.
Yeah.
Hello everybody, my name is Spencer Clifton. I am a communication studies major here at Central Washington University, as well as president of Students with a Purpose, the nonprofit and student entrepreneurship club here on campus.
And I'm Jaden Almascour. I'm the vice president of SWAP, and I double major currently in film production and PR.
My name is Leanna St. Clair, and I'm majoring in business administration, specializing in supply chain management, minoring in nonprofit organization administration. Before we get started, I'd like to have the students behind you stand up, and these are some of the students that are in the club and will be coming with us. And some of their majors are film, ITAM, economics, business administration, early childhood education, nonprofit, Chinese, environmental studies, science, public relations, and psychology.
I'll bring one in on the computer.
It is because of our diverse majors that we were able to bring SWAP to life in the fall quarter of 2019. We have freshmen to seniors as well as graduate students. Our mission is to create awareness for and promote nonprofit and social entrepreneurship organizations, as well as empowering the students of Central Washington University to take action on specific issues using nonprofit and entrepreneurship approach. Not only do we have a growing presence on campus in Ellensburg, but we also have an online student who is with us since the beginning, Laurel Portner. Laurel is one of our co-secretaries and the online outreach coordinator. Laurel will be joining us from Vancouver. This will be her first time meeting fellow Central students in person since Laurel has never been on campus.
The National Conference on Undergraduate Research has been the premier national conference for interdisciplinary student research for the past 34 years. NCUR 2020 will be held at Montana State University in Bozeman, Montana. It takes place from March 26th through March 28th, and we have added the extra days of the 25th and the 29th for our groups to travel. It is at this conference that we hope to do a presentation on the impact of team development intervention on the communication and productivity of an interdisciplinary student leadership team. Of the 4,000 applications that were reviewed for NCUR, only 72 interdisciplinary research presentations were accepted. It is an honor to be among those 72.
While there, we will also be attending various presentations across the disciplines. We will also be attending a couple of keynote speakers, one of them being Dr. Mae Jamison, who is the first African American woman to go to space. She also founded Dorothy Jameson Foundation of Excellence that creates programs that highlights other women in aviation and space. While here, we will also be able to attend the Graduate and Opportunity Fair, or Graduate and Professional Opportunity Fair. While there, Jesus, I'm never this nervous. Sorry. We will be able to network with our peers, graduate students across the nation, as well as other professionals. And we will also get the opportunity to have like application fees waived, which is really cool. By networking, we will be able to build our relationships with others and help our professional and personal developments. We can also build relationships with other schools in Central, so like we'll act like as a positive face for Central while there. During this trip, I already said that, the team bonding. Yep, cool, thank you.
I would like to add
Sorry.
that this research is highly applicable to students across the United States as it pertains to professional development, so attending this conference is vital in sharing this information. Furthermore, this opportunity will allow Central Washington University students to demonstrate as well as strengthen their skills as it pertains to the represented majors that we've discussed before, all while showcasing the development of a leadership team, setting a tone for future clubs and future boards, all while representing Central Washington University at a national conference.
Yeah, and then after the conference, we'll be able to bring back our knowledge to CWU Source and share that with like other clubs and organizations for their benefit as well. As a club, we aspire to help those in need and those in our community. By attending this conference, we think that will improve our needs.
So this is our proposed budget for 14 students. The airfare, we looked at it, and it's this is airfare from SeaTac Airport to Bozeman. The ground transportation is the shuttle bus to and from Ellensburg, as well as shuttling to and from in the hotel to Bozeman as well, so the airport. Lodging, this is the cost of 4 rooms, $185 per person per room, and several students will be sharing the room as well. The conference registration is $225 per person for 14 students. And meals are $61 per day per diem rate for travel days March 25th to March 29th. $20.30, which is a third of the per diem rate on conference days. So the transportation, we looked at flights from Spokane, and SeaTac was cheaper. Lodging, the hotel is one that was recommended by Anchor. We got it at a conference rate. Not only that, but we provided free shuttling to and from the conference, which helped us reduce transportation costs. The conference registration, Central has an enhanced membership through the Council of Undergraduate Research, so we were able to receive a discounted rate savings of $35 per person, which totals $490 for 14 students. The meals, it is breakfast and lunch are included at the conference, so it would be dinner for the conference days plus travel days. One thing to note is that Anchor comes to the West Coast every couple of years. This is primarily an East Coast conference. Last year it was in Atlanta, Georgia. This funding proposal is for 14 students at $933 per person, totaling $13,666.50. So we've looked at other funding and have secured the Office of Undergraduate Research travel grant for $1,500, as well as the Career Services Professional Development Funds for $500. We're waiting for club funding of $2,000 pending acceptance. We understand that meals might be an issue, so we can use our travel grant and career services professional development funds to supplement the meals. Another avenue we are pursuing is securing a van for lower transportation costs. If and when we get the van, that's notified.
That'll open the floor to questions. Cece?
Of the 14 going, how many are presenting?
All of us.
Okay, and then how many are presenting at source?
All of us.
So exciting. Okay, cool.
Any other questions? Alejandro?
Is everybody in the club, or are there other members that
We have our leadership team that is going primarily, and then avid club members that have been involved are also going to be going, but no, not the entire club as a whole.
See no more questions? Thank you. Vote on it.
Yeah, I also want to add this is harder than.
If I could just have 2 more seconds, I just wanted to extend an invitation. We're having a meeting tomorrow night on board development at 6 o'clock in Samuelson 108. If you really want to understand what we are about and what the SWAT family is, I heavily encourage you guys to just come down, check us out, and see what we're involved with. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Oh, and Nick Fawcett's going to be there. He's a board member from the Yakima Valley Scoopin' Kids Foundation, and he's going to be doing a presentation on board development. Thank you.
Alright. Alright, with that, we'll move to the next part of the agenda, which is old business, supplemental fund request voting. We'll start with request 2048, men's lacrosse competition travel for $6,400. Open up the floor to discussion. Please feel free to go over the minutes. Alex?
For the sake of not staying in limbo for too much longer with what we have, I move that we recommend to fund the full amount of $6,400.
Motion on the table. Is there a second? Danny's that second. Dane seconds. Alright, discussion on the motion to fund the full amount, or allocate the full amount, $6,400. Dane?
Yeah, I like that they were involved in the community, have the sponsorship, so that just means they're involved with their club too. They're sharing a hotel room with 4 people, at the house that way. They're involved with fundraising, I think that's important as well. Yeah.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, move to voting. All those in favor of recommending the full amount? Opposed? Abstentions? 4. Alright, so moved. Allocate the full amount, $6,400. We'll now move to request 2049, which is the Alpha National Conference, $6,180 or $7,000.
That one changed.
No, I think that one changed to.
You're right. 6,180.
Alright,
Yeah.
6,180. I'm just gonna write this.
Yeah.
Alright, so open up the floor to discussion. Yeah. Alex?
Likewise, in the interest of not keeping the rest of our requests in limbo, sorry about the decimal, Lacey. I recommend that we approve $5,801.27.
Motion on the table, allocate the remainder of the budget. Eric is that second. Eric seconds. Discussion on the motion to exhaust the budget. Seeing no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? 4-4. So moved to allocate $5,801.27 for the Alpha National Conference. We'll now move to the final request, which is 2050, the new position for Pierce Campus, $35,000. Alex.
Due to our lack of funds, I move that we recommend to deny the request 2050.
Motion on the table. Is there a second? Alright, no second, that motion dies. We continue with normal discussion on request 2050. Joe?
Simply from a procedural standpoint, I think as we discussed last week, knowing that the budget is exhausted, that if we were to wish to fund something, we would have to increase the supplemental budget to be able to accommodate for that. So.
Eric?
I would like to table the discussion for 2050 until we have determined if we're going to accept any more requests for spring and or increase the budget.
Motion? Alex seconds. Discussion on the motion to table request 2050 voting. Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. we'll table request 2050 to next week. Lacey?
I'm sorry, can I get some clarification on the last request for Mariachi 2055 on the amount that they requested?
They
Do you have it
requested
in there?
$5,818 was their updated, and then added at the end $360 on top of that for insurance.
But was that per person or is that total?
Because they said $30.
$30 a person.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you.
The last person.
That's what I was asking about.
With that, we move to our currently tabled business, which is a discussion on the budget as well as the investing.
I was going to simply throw out there that if we think we're gonna have a longer discussion, I would like, because I can't make a motion, to entertain a brief motion to use the restroom and grab whatever people need. If we think it's gonna be a quick discussion, but given we spent an hour discussing this earlier.
I'll make a motion for a 5-minute recess.
Recess, Monica seconds. All those in favor? Opposed? Opposed?
Somebody's opposed.
Yeah, right now we have one
He's
group
like,
and
I'm
one
ready.
opposed.
So moved.
I think passed now.
We'll call the meeting back to order at 7:30. Okay, everyone, call this meeting back to order at 7:32. Looking at you, Lacey.
Did you just say that means you, Lacey?
Sorry, disturbance over there, emergency.
You have to call the gallery out first.
Okay. Alright, we'll continue with the agenda, which is our table discussion. Dave?
I just want to put on the record that with request 2049, since we gave them not the full amount, maybe we should revisit that if we do add more money to the budget, just to be fair to them as well. Just have that in the back of their minds if we do increase the budget.
Alright. Well, with that, we'll go into the discussion of what we want to do with the budget moving forward, as well as if we want to accept more further requests going into spring quarter. Joey?
And based on where the last conversation ended, I think starting with that, because that seemed to be the deciding factor for the tie-breaking vote, is do you all want, and in my opinion, this is what I'll put out, you have three options. Either to say we're not receiving any additional requests beyond what you have literally on your agenda now, so 2055, 2055 is the last one, is one option. Option two is to say, yes, we're going to entertain only those that have already submitted. Or saying, yes, we're willing to entertain up to whatever point in time, and whether we put one out there of a date or not is for you all to decide. I think you all need to decide that, what you would like to do, and then you can have the discussion on the budget.
I will be willing to do 50,000 if we do not accept the spring requests.
Is that a motion? Dave, second.
Clarification.
Sure.
Does that mean the ones that Lacey has in her inbox or just the ones here on the screen?
Well, we're talking about opening for spring, right? Or,
Because she has at least 10 more.
I mean, I threw out the three options of either we leave it where it is right now, we hear only those 10, or we open it to a
the
certain
10.
point.
That's the number I was missing.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I would second that.
Alright,
Okay.
Dave seconds.
That's a motion.
Alright.
To clarify what the motion is this a motion to increase the supplemental by 50,000 and?
To only hear.
And to only hear these 10.
Okay, I'm making sure it was clear for everyone what the motion was, since it's a two-part piece.
Fine structure. Eric?
I would like to amend the motion to separate the two parts. To separate the $50,000 from hearing the additional 10 requests.
Cece?
Can I ask my question?
Yeah.
Okay, so the 50,000, it's not, so we're approving all of these and then 50,000, or are we just doing 50,000? Because if we do that, then we have to approve West Side and then have 20,000, we 15.
Sorry.
Alex?
I don't have a specific set of things that we approve in mind. That's just kind of the compromise that I'm willing to make.
And I know we're totally out of parliamentary procedure, Eric, so you can do that. But there's no one else here except for Greg and whoever's going to watch us on the video, which is
Aubrey and Eric.
Yeah, which is going to be us who are already here. I would recommend that we do have it as two separate to avoid any convoluted pieces of this conversation getting drug out based on technical pieces. I'd rather we be very clear on one and then very clear on the other. Because my concern would be if there's a hang up on the dollar amount, that we're going to go round and round about just whether or not we're going to hear just these, just the 10 or the others.
So since we're already out of parliamentary procedure, can we just...
You can amend your motion, which is
I don't want to
germane.
I just want to scrap it.
Let's do a new one, but let's talk about requests first. We'll take a request first.
Okay,
then budget.
that one first. Well, yeah, I'm willing to do these 10 and then cut it off after that.
Okay. Good motion. Eric second.
No. This is not a second.
Alright.
You gotta wait.
Fine. So
Is
now
there
we
a
got
second?
a motion on the table. Dave, is that a second?
And second, just to see the next 10.
Alright. Is this discussion now?
Yes.
Okay. Eric.
So for this motion, I think we are again not listening. Listening isn't the right word. Taking into consideration what PBAC has asked us to not take requests from spring, I think is problematic, and I fear, and this is just maybe unfounded, but PBAC saying, well, we don't agree with that, and themselves doing it without us saying yay or nay. I don't, because it really sounds like PBAC is very concerned, and this is not just from one person. It sounds like just my own take, multiple people. So I just want to make sure that we understand that this could be out of our hands.
Thank you.
I mean, I feel like we're all over the place and we're kind of contradicting ourselves, right? So first 2 quarters, we set a deadline and let anybody else, anybody submit a request, right? And then all of a sudden we're cutting them off and only and not doing it for spring quarter. And maybe there's some things that students in spring quarter want to do, and they just all of a sudden came up with it in February. And now then we're not necessarily taking away that opportunity, but it feels like that.
Yeah.
CC.
We approved, or we had the request for them to put in their request at a certain time for fall and winter because there was money to give them. Now we have money, but we don't have money that we're allocated to give them. So that's why we're skeptical about, or I'm skeptical about hearing other future requests, because it's so I just think that's the difference between fall and winter and now spring, is that right now we're basically at 0 already. This will be touching it already, approving these people, and then seeing the next 10. So it's just again, it's more I feel like we had a responsibility to use the $300,000, and now we have to hold ourselves accountable for it being spent, and whatever means that it was spent. Not that it was a good or bad thing, but we've used our budget.
Josh.
Is there a policy or regulation that says that requires us to not go over budget? So we don't have to spend a lot, in theory, we don't have to spend a lot of time talking about do we raise it or do we not. We just review everything as is, and if we decide to vote individually to go over our budget, which happens in your personal finance, sometimes you go over budget, sometimes you don't. You have savings, you transfer at the end of the year. We could just proceed throughout the rest of the year at an individual basis and vote yes or no on all of them based on their merit. Those that don't think we should be going over budget would vote no. Those who think that it's okay and they find merit could vote yes. In theory.
Alex.
I think my only issue with that is that we then are in limbo for then the entire year. If we set this limit, we know where we're at, we're done, we can move on to other business. If we're doing it on a case-by-case basis, then, okay, so we add them next week, and then the week after that, and the week after that. I just, yeah.
But there's nothing to say that we won't just add another 50,000, right?
Well,
Like once we could approve it now, and then next month we could be at the same exact spot again.
So, this was my compromise. I don't want to raise the budget at all. People want to raise the budget, so this is my middle ground. Yes, you're right. I completely agree. That's why I don't want to raise the budget at all. But this is where I'm willing to compromise on that.
Hickory.
I just only have one question for you, Alex. Is what is not necessarily holding you back, but why? I'm still kind of confusing. We have this money. We're supposed to be using it, and I don't understand the hesitation with increasing it or actually using it. Right? I don't understand.
And this is all germane, right? So we can.
Yes.
Cool. I guess I should be asking. So, like I said in our previous discussion earlier today, this this does get into like slippery slope territory, and that's probably not the strongest way to approach the argument because we don't currently have all of the numbers necessary to evaluate on a numbers basis. That's what the subcommittee is for, to start to evaluate those things. So we do have some hard numbers. So right now, all we really do have is kind of theoretical stuff. But where I'm at right now is, like we discussed, if we keep having these kind of requests, and if we have a set of requests that are pretty consistent, then it is precedent that we add those to base funding. So that now goes to base funding. We fund that every quadrennium. That's more money that we're allocating in base funding. Eventually, more often than not, if I'm not mistaken, these areas ask for increases in their base funding. That means that we now have to add more money into base funding. It just keeps going, is basically my point. I think if we don't, like Cece said, hold ourselves accountable and give ourselves an actual budget and an actual confines to say, hey, listen, this is what we're willing to allocate. After that, then we need to hold ourselves accountable and be responsible. If we just keep allocating money, that compounds. It has other effects. It's not just our supplemental budget right now. It's not just the 10 requests we have right now. That adds up. And I think in general, in higher ed, so to answer your question more directly, this is just kind of my broad ideas about higher ed. We continue to allocate money, and it keeps raising budgets, raising prices. I just don't want to contribute to that in this committee.
Lacey. Yeah. All right, Josh.
I just, I was going to say it earlier, but I appreciate the direction you're coming with this, and I've been abstaining from the vote because they're student fees, and I just didn't feel comfortable voting on raising or not raising your fees. I think that part should, be your decision. But I will say I've never met a student that said, I don't want to go to college or I don't want to go to Central because they won't fund my trips through the S&A fee. I have heard students say, I'm not going to college or going to Central because I can't afford it. And so I appreciate what you're saying in a broad statement, and I see the conundrum here because part of it is, well, these are already student fees that students paid, so they should be spent now. But I hear you saying, but we have to think about the big picture and the broad picture, and maybe if we stick to a budget, we won't have to raise student fees in the future, or maybe we can even reduce student fees. I think I hear you saying that. Yeah. So I just want to say I appreciate your thought on that and thinking holistically from that perspective. Because I would tend to lean toward, if I were a student today, I would probably be I would be voting with you on this. My unofficial stance.
All right, guess we'll just call the question, which is the motion to fund, or just to hear the two costs.
Wait a minute. Is there a motion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to fund the 10, okay.
Or
Just
just
to
to
allow
fund
the
it.
10 remaining to come forward,
And then
cut it off after that.
Yeah. All right, and so all those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Alright, so moved. We'll hear the remaining in the bucket, and it's the remaining 10.
The remaining 10 come up, and then we will notify all others that we are no longer receiving any supplemental requests for the year.
Alright. Okay. Joey.
As we are now going to move into the conversation about the budget piece, I just want to point out from I'm going to say factual standpoint, the budget we're talking about is money that is actually, and this is not going to be the correct financial, but it's leftover. This isn't coming out of the current student fees. This is actually money that wasn't spent from previous student fees that the committee has been sitting on. So I mean, it's a nuance, but it's important when students are asking, what are my fees going towards? This is actually money that has not been spent because of the reserve that's sitting in there. And so while yes, it's S&A money that's going towards that, it's not the revenue being allocated into these base funding. This is us trying to be intentional that we're not sitting on money that students have paid and that it's not being used. Because I think there's the twofold, because there is the challenge of looking forward and being intentional so we don't end up in a situation. Because I will tell you, my big point of things over the time I've been on here is to avoid us increasing the fee. And that has been intentional with how we've set up the budget, is to avoid that for as long as we possibly can. But also being mindful that we can answer to the students that we're not just sitting on money that could benefit them. Because that's also a concern of, well, why? Because that's where you get, why am I still paying this if you have money you're not even using? And S&A money based on our guidelines can only be used for one-time funding. This reserve fund can only be used for one-time funding, not ongoing. So it does create a spot that there's certain things we can't use this for because it has to be one time from the reserve. Lacey?
And so thank you for setting me up for that one, Joey, but just
set
to
you up
add
for
on
you.
to that, my question, which might be potentially a longer answer than what we probably have time for tonight, but would be if we do not want to use this in a supplemental form, then I want to know what we're going to use it on. Because it's very important to be intentional about what we're doing with the funding, and sitting on the funding is not a good intention.
And what was this, last week when we talked about, when we had the budget discussion, maybe the week before, I think that the subcommittee will lend a lot of direction for that, and that's why initially I was saying, like, I don't want to raise it until we have that conversation, because then we will have some clearer direction. But I guess that's just my perspective, is that the subcommittee will offer some better direction.
Having established that we won't see any more requests this year, I'd like to table our discussion for next week, seeing that we only have the room until 8 o'clock.
I guess that's a motion.
I want to make a point of order. No, I forgot what it was, sorry. But, yeah.
That's good. I second.
That's the motion. There's a second. Discussion to table. Just further discussion for next week.
This is more a question of Lacey, which I think may lend some credence. Given that we're tabling this to next week, and we will then look at the remaining of what we have to vote on here, I know you haven't processed all the reports that you have necessarily in there. Would it be possible to have a rough dollar amount of what is being requested? Knowing that could change as they're working with you, but I think that would be helpful for the committee to know. We know what's remaining because we've heard all the requests current. But out of those 10 requests, what dollar amount we're looking at?
Roughly an additional 63,000.
Okay.
But yes, I can bring that and add them to the list by whatever next week, Wednesday.
So then,
Now I remember what it was.
Okay. But now it's voting.
I'll wait till after.
Yeah.
I'm waiting till after.
Okay. So called question. So we'll move to voting. All those in favor of tabling discussion next week? Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. We'll table it to next week. Eric?
So just so we all know, the discussion of the subcommittee and whatever is decided there and whatever is voted on by this committee, it is not a germane process until it has been approved by, what is it? It's not PBAC, it's the other committee. UPAC. So we are not eligible to use that information in our determination because it is not approved by UPAC. So delaying fine, we've done it, we're gonna talk about it next week. We can't use any information from the subcommittee because we can't, that's not a part of our rules yet. And let's remember that.
Alright.
I mean, I will, and I'm just gonna jump in to touch on this so we can close out. I would agree with Eric, depending on what the subcommittee comes up with. There are set things that we could, but there are a lot of things, as we've discussed and me and Brandon have discussed, that would require to go through a formal process. So it ultimately depends on what comes out of the subcommittee.
Alright, with that, I'll move to communications received. I do have one. It's from BSU Board 2019-2020. 2 services and activities. There's no way that Showtime happens without you all. We cannot begin to thank you for all your support you give us, but we did decide to start by sending you all this card. All of our thanks, BSU.
Oh, that's nice.
Pass it around. And then with that, we'll do public comment, second call. Any public comment? Joey?
I appreciate all the discussion. I know these are tough decisions. We're gonna have lots of conversations, even going into spring with what we have about a lot of this, so we're gonna discuss it more. And I'll just reiterate what was mentioned earlier, since Mariachi invited everyone to their recital, which starts in 7 minutes for anyone who wants to stay on campus longer.
Eric?
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Yes. Dan seconds. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. Adjourn this meeting at 7:52.